I'm Amelia. I'm 32 years old, and my parents forged my signature to take out a $200,000 loan against my own home to buy my brother his dream house. Before I tell you how their wedding gift to me became the key to their downfall, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. I'd love to see how far this story reaches. It all detonated on a Sunday, as most family tragedies do, over a pot roast that was so dry it could have been used as a doorstop. I was at my parents' house for our obligatory weekly dinner. It was the usual stage play. My dad, George, holding court at the head of the table, pontificating about politics. My mom, Diana, fluttering around my younger brother, Mark, refilling his glass and laughing a little too loudly at his jokes. Mark, as always, was soaking it all in like a king, accepting tribute. His fiancée, Ryan, was there too, looking handsome and, as usual, slightly out of place, like a designer suit at a garage sale. "We have the most wonderful news," my mom announced, clapping her hands together. Her smile was blinding. "We've done it. We've helped Mark and Ryan get their dream home." I offered a genuine congratulations, a warm smile I had perfected over the years. I was truly happy for him. Mark had been obsessed with this house for months. A beautiful white colonial with a wraparound porch and big oak trees in the yard. It was a perfect slice of the American dream. My dad cleared his throat, fixing me with a look that I knew all too well. It was the now for the fine print look. "Well, Amelia, you played your part too. We took out a small loan to cover the down payment and closing costs. It's your responsibility as the one who's well established to help family get a start." He said it so casually, like he was announcing the weather. A small loan. Responsibility. The words hung in the air, heavy and familiar. I didn't push. I didn't ask questions. In my family, you learn that asking questions only makes things worse. You just nod, eat your dry pot roast, and go home feeling that familiar, dull ache of being the family's walking, talking 401k. I assumed, foolishly, that it was just another case of them lending him money they didn't have, money I'd eventually be asked to help with. I was wrong. It was so much worse. The truth arrived 3 days later. It wasn't a phone call. It wasn't an email. It was a thick, cream-colored envelope from my mortgage company, mixed in with the usual junk mail and bills. I almost tossed it aside, but the familiar logo caught my eye. I slid it open with my thumb, a vague sense of unease, starting a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. It wasn't an advertisement. It wasn't a standard statement. It was a disbursement notice, a home equity line of credit, a HELOC, for the amount of $200,000. The document stated clearly that this line of credit had been taken out against my home. My signature was on the bottom of the enclosed copy of the agreement, a sloppy, arrogant imitation of my name. The letter shook in my hand. My breath caught in my chest. This wasn't just about money. They hadn't just co-signed a loan for me. They had used my sanctuary, the one place on this earth I had built for myself, piece by piece, away from all the family chaos, and they had turned it into collateral for my brother's perfect life. The silence from that Sunday dinner suddenly made a horrifying kind of sense. It wasn't my quiet acceptance. It was the stunned silence of a woman who didn't yet know the ground beneath her feet had just been mortgaged and sold. Before I could even process the legal implications, before the anger could truly ignite, the ghosts of the past came rushing in. The weight of 32 years settled on my shoulders, and I finally understood. This wasn't a new betrayal. It was the culmination of a lifetime of them. It was the final, undeniable proof of a truth I had spent my entire life trying to outrun, outwork, and ignore. In the eyes of my parents, I was not a daughter. I was a resource. My brother Mark was the investment, and I was the endowment fund meant to ensure his success. My mind flashed back to being 18, sitting at that very same dining table, the wood worn smooth with years of family dinners. My acceptance letter to the state university was clutched in my hand, the paper soft from being read and reread 100 times. My chest was puffed out with a pride that felt pure and boundless. I was the first in our family to go to a 4-year university for something as abstract and promising as computer science. I imagined my parents being as proud as I was. Instead, my father, George, had looked at the tuition statement with a grimace, as if it were a personal insult. That's a hell of a lot of money for playing with computers, daughter, he grunted, pushing the paper back at me. But you're a smart kid. You'll figure it out. And I did. Figuring it out meant working 2 jobs. One stocking shelves at a grocery store until 2 a.m., another bussing tables at a diner on weekends. It meant taking out every student loan I was eligible for, writing essays for scholarships I rarely got, and eating more instant ramen than any human should consume. I graduated with honors, a promising future, and a mountain of debt that felt like a physical weight on my back. 2 years after that dinner, Mark turned 18. He didn't want college. He wanted a car. Not just any car, a brand new Ford Mustang, cherry red with black leather seats. I remember the day they gave it to him. It was parked in the driveway with a giant bow on it, looking like a commercial. My mom had tears in her eyes, the happy, proud kind I had always craved from her. He just deserves a good, strong start in life, she'd whispered to my aunt, her voice thick with emotion, to feel confident. I was there visiting on a weekend home from college. My 1992 Honda Civic, which I'd bought with my own money, was leaking oil in the street. I remember the bitter taste in my mouth, a mixture of jealousy and injustice. Later that evening, when I quietly, gently mentioned the stark difference in their support, my dad clapped me on the shoulder with a heavy hand. Amelia, it's different. You're the responsible one. You're strong. We never have to worry about you. Mark, he's more sensitive. He needs a little more help from us. That was the story of my life. Amelia is strong. Amelia can handle it. Amelia will figure it out. It was a twisted compliment that was actually a license to neglect. It was their get-out-of-jail-free card for every act of favoritism, every moment of inequality. It meant my struggles were mine alone, and my successes were a shared family resource. Every milestone I hit was immediately repurposed to serve Mark. When I landed my first big job at a software firm in the city, my mother's first words weren't congratulations. They were, "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. Now you can afford to help Mark with his rent. He's struggling a bit this month." When I bought my first house, this house, the very one they had just secretly mortgaged, they didn't tour it with pride. They toured it with appraisal in their eyes. "So much space for just one person," my dad had commented, running a hand along the banister. "You know, you should let Mark move into the spare bedroom until he gets on his feet." Mark was 29 years old at the time. The memories flooded me, each one another brick in the wall that had been silently, steadily building between us. This letter, this forgery, wasn't a single shocking act of betrayal. It was the capstone on a monument to their neglect, a monument they had been building my entire life. I sank onto my couch, the letter clutched in my fist, the paper crinkling. My breath was shallow. The room felt like it was closing in, the walls pulsating with the silent, screaming injustice of it all. I needed to talk to someone who wouldn't give me the tired, toxic advice. But they're your family. My hands shaking, I called my best friend, Sarah. We'd started at our tech firm in the same week, 2 young, hungry programmers trying to make our way. She'd been my guest at enough awkward Thanksgiving dinners to know the whole script. She knew the players. She knew the game. "Sarah," I said, my voice barely a whisper. I couldn't even form the words to explain. I just took a picture of the letter with my trembling hand and texted it to her. A moment later, my phone rang. It was her. "No," she said, her voice low and furious. "Amelia, please tell me this is a sick joke." They did not. "They did," I choked out, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. "A HELOC. 200 grand. Against my house." Amelia, that's not just a loan. That is a federal crime. That is so far over the line. The line is a dot to them." She was quiet for a second. I could hear the furious clicking of her keyboard in the background. How the hell could they even get it approved? The bank would need income verification. Your signature notarized. And that's when another cold, greasy piece of the puzzle slid into place, making me feel sick to my stomach. "My dad," I said, the realization dawning on me with absolute horror. "He wasn't just a teller, Sarah. He was a branch manager for 30 years before he retired. He knows the systems inside and out. He knows what paperwork to file, what corners to cut, which signatures get scrutinized and which ones don't. He probably still has contacts. He knew exactly how to package this to make it look legitimate enough to get past a preliminary check." "Oh, Amelia, God, I'm so sorry." And that's when it happened. The anger, the cold, hard rage that had been a block of ice in my chest, began to thaw, and in its place, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated grief washed over me. I wasn't just mad, I was heartbroken. My own parents, The two people on this planet who were supposed to protect me, to be my safe harbor, had just drilled a hole in the bottom of my lifeboat to raise my brother's yacht. I dropped my head into my hands, the phone pressed hard against my ear. The professional composure I had built my entire life on crumbled into dust, and for the first time, I let myself feel the full, crushing weight of being their second-class daughter. "It's not about the money, Sarah," I whispered, the words catching in my throat, hot with tears I refused to shed. "It's this house. It's the one thing in my entire life that was completely mine. I built it. I earned it. It was my escape from all of them. And they walked into it without a key, and they violated it. They didn't just take my money. They took my peace. They took my safety." Sarah didn't offer easy platitudes. She didn't say it'll be okay. She just listened. She let the silence hold my pain. When I was done, her voice was firm, resolute. "So, what are you going to do, eh? And don't you dare tell me you're going to figure out a payment plan." The old Amelia would have. The responsible one. The strong one. She would have sighed, accepted the burden, and started calculating interest rates. She would have swallowed the betrayal and called it family duty. She would have done it to keep the peace. But the woman holding that letter, the woman whose sanctuary had been systematically invaded and sold, was different. The peace was already gone. They had nuked it from orbit. "I don't know exactly what I'm going to do," I said, my voice low and steady now, the grief hardening into something else, something cold and clear as diamond resolve. "But I know what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to pay for it. Not one single cent." After I hung up with Sarah, I sat in the echoing silence of my compromised home. Every shadow seemed to mock me. Was this wall mine? Was that window? Or did it all belong to the bank now, thanks to my own family? The question wasn't just financial. It was existential. I pulled out my laptop, my movements precise and deliberate. I looked up the number for a lawyer my company kept on retainer for contract disputes. His name was Michael Wilson. His website was sparse, professional, and featured a string of testimonials praising him for being aggressive, unflinching, and results-oriented. Perfect. I dialed the number. My hand was perfectly steady. The storm was raging inside me, but on the outside, I was ice. A calm, polite operator answered. "Yes," I said, my voice devoid of any emotion. "I need to schedule an immediate consultation with Mr. Wilson. It's regarding a case of bank fraud and felony identity theft." I paused, letting the words sink in, for myself as much as for her. "The perpetrators are my parents." Driving to my parents' house for the confrontation felt like flying into the heart of a hurricane. The sky outside was a calm, deceptive suburban blue, but I knew what was waiting for me. I had called my mom, my voice carefully neutral, and told her I needed to drop by to discuss something important about Mark's house purchase. Her voice on the other end was light, sickeningly cheerful, completely oblivious to the tidal wave that was about to crash over her. "Of course, dear, we'll all be here. Mark and Ryan just stopped by to celebrate." Perfect. A full audience. It was exactly what I wanted. I walked in without knocking, a habit from childhood that now felt like a trespass. They were all gathered in the living room, laughing at something on TV. The laughter died the second they saw my face. I wasn't carrying a bottle of wine. I wasn't smiling. I was carrying a large manila envelope, and my expression was one they had never seen on me before. It was the face of a stranger. "Amelia, what a surprise," my mom said, getting up, her hostess smile plastered on her face. "I didn't hear you pull up." I held up a hand, a gesture so uncharacteristically firm it stopped her in her tracks. "Sit down, Mom." My voice was flat, devoid of warmth. It silenced her more effectively than a shout ever could have. I walked to the center of the room, to the coffee table that had been the centerpiece of our family life for decades. It had held birthday cakes, board games, and now the evidence of their crime. I didn't say anything at first. I just opened the envelope and slid the bank notice onto the polished wood. My father, George, glanced down at it. For a split second, a flash of pure, unadulterated panic flickered in his eyes, before the familiar mask of paternal authority slammed back down. Mark just looked confused, his brow furrowed. Ryan, the outsider, the witness, looked instantly and intensely nervous, his eyes darting from the paper to my face. "I received this in the mail today," I said, my voice dangerously quiet, each word carefully enunciated. "It's a disbursement notice for a $200,000 line of credit. It has been taken out against my house, and it has my signature on it." My mother, Diana, a true master of amateur dramatics, put a hand to her chest. Her eyes widened in a performance of shock. What? Oh, Amelia, that's terrible. Someone must have stolen your identity. George, did you hear that? I didn't even look at her. I kept my gaze locked on my father. Yes, someone did, I said. Someone who knew my social security number, which they probably got from my old tax forms stored in the attic. Someone who knew the exact name of my mortgage company. Someone, I continued, my voice dropping lower, who used to be a bank branch manager and knows exactly how to forge a document so it passes an initial inspection. The color drained from my father's face. He looked like he'd been punched in the gut. Mark was looking back and forth between us, his mouth hanging slightly open as the pieces started to click in his slower mind. My dad puffed out his chest, falling back on his lifelong defense mechanism, righteous indignation. He went on the attack. We did it to help your brother. As for family, something you obviously don't understand. Family? I let out a short, bitter laugh that held no humor. You call this family? You took the roof over my head, the single biggest asset I have ever owned, and you put it on the line without so much as a phone call. You signed my name to a federal legal document. That's not family, Dad. That's a felony. It's fraud. That's when my mother's carefully constructed performance shattered, and her true, ugly feelings came pouring out, raw and unfiltered. Oh, don't be so dramatic, Amelia. It's just a loan. It's paperwork. You have that big, important job. You can more than afford it. Honestly, that house is far too big for you anyway, all alone in it. Mark and Ryan need a proper family home to start their lives, to have children. Her words hit me like a physical blow. That house is too big for you anyway. It wasn't just a clumsy justification. It was what she truly believed. My success, my home, my solitary life, it was a waste in her eyes. It was nothing more than a resource pool for the son that mattered. It was the single most cruel and dismissive thing she could have said. And in that moment, it was a gift. It erased any lingering shred of doubt, any whisper of filial obligation that might have remained in the darkest corners of my heart. My gaze shifted to Mark. He was staring at the intricate pattern on the Persian rug, refusing to meet my eyes. He was trying to wish himself invisible. And you, Mark? I asked, my voice like ice. You knew about this? He mumbled something, a pathetic, cowardly sound. What was that? I pressed, stepping closer. Look at me when I'm talking to you. He finally, reluctantly looked up. His eyes, the same blue as mine, but perpetually weaker, were swimming with a pathetic mix of guilt and defiance. They were just trying to help, he said, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't know it was going to be such a big deal. A big deal? My control finally snapped. The ice cracked. A big deal? Mortgaging my house without my permission isn't a big deal? Forging my signature on a loan application isn't a big deal. You stood there and you let them do it. You were going to take that money, that stolen money, and you were going to move into your dream house, a house built on a foundation of lies and grand larceny, and you didn't think it was a big deal? Ryan, who had been sitting frozen this whole time, suddenly stood up. His face was ashen. I did not know about this, he said, his voice shaking. He looked at Mark, then at my parents with a look of dawning horror. You told me your parents were giving us a generous gift. You didn't tell me it was stolen. It is a gift, my dad boomed, trying to reclaim control. A gift from the whole family, a family that is supposed to support each other, not tear each other apart. And this is the thanks we get. An interrogation? I ignored him completely. I had my answer. They were all complicit, each in their own special way. My parents, the architects of the crime. Mark, the silent, willing, and entitled beneficiary. I calmly walked back to the coffee table, picked up the letter, and folded it neatly, putting it back in the manila envelope. My movements were slow, deliberate. The storm inside me had passed, leaving behind a cold, hard, terrifying certainty. Here's what's going to happen now, I said, my voice steady again, addressing the whole room. Tomorrow morning, I have an 8 a.m. meeting with my lawyer. After that meeting, I will be reporting this fraudulent loan to my bank's corporate fraud department. They will launch a full investigation. My mother gasped, a hand flying to her mouth. You wouldn't, Amelia. You would not do that to your own parents. We are your family. You already answered that question for me, I said, looking her dead in the eye. You're the ones who were willing to risk my financial future, my credit, and my home. I'm just the one who's cleaning up the mess. I turned my gaze to my dad. You have until the bank's investigator calls you to figure out how you're going to pay back the $200,000 plus fees, because I can assure you I will not be paying a single cent." I turned and walked toward the front door. For the first time in my 32 years, I was walking away from a family problem instead of absorbing it, fixing it, or paying for it. I could feel their stunned, furious stares boring into my back. Just before I closed the heavy oak door behind me, I heard my father's voice, shaking with a rage that was mixed with a new, unfamiliar note of fear. "You'll regret this, Amelia. You are turning your back on this family." I paused for a second, my hand on the cool brass doorknob, but I didn't turn around. "No, Dad," I said, speaking softly to the closed door. "You turned your back on me a long, long time ago. I'm just finally seeing it clearly." And I walked away, the sound of their perfect, curated world starting to crumble into dust echoing behind me. The morning after the confrontation was unnervingly quiet, the silence of the battlefield after the first bloody charge. I met with Michael Wilson, my new lawyer, at his downtown office. It was a place of polished wood and quiet efficiency, a world away from the emotional chaos of my parents' house. He was a no-nonsense man in his late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes and a suit that probably cost more than my first car. He didn't waste time with small talk. I laid out the whole story chronologically, factually, placing the copy of the forged HELOC agreement on his desk like a smoking gun. He listened intently, his face unreadable, not interrupting once. When I was finished, he steepled his fingers and looked at me across the vast expanse of his mahogany desk. "This is not a simple family dispute, Amelia," he said, his tone grave. "Let's be perfectly clear. This is bank fraud, a federal offense. Your father's professional background as a bank manager demonstrates clear intent and premeditation. Your mother and brother could be considered co-conspirators. The bank will not see this as a family squabble. They will see it as a direct attack on their assets, and they will react accordingly." He let that sink in. Jail time. Not just a lawsuit or a financial penalty. Actual criminal charges. A part of me, the old conditioned part, felt a pang of visceral sickness at the thought. But then I remembered my mother's voice, dripping with contempt. "That house is too big for you anyway." The memory was like a splash of ice water. "My goal is simple, Michael," I said, my voice steady. "I want this fraudulent loan off my property. I want my name cleared, and I want to ensure this can never happen again." "Understood," he said, nodding. "The first step is a certified letter to the bank's corporate fraud department, officially notifying them that you are the victim of identity theft. We will simultaneously send a cease and desist letter to your parents, informing them that all future communication must go through my office." He paused, his gaze sharp. "Are you prepared for the fallout? This will get very, very ugly." "It's already ugly," I replied. "I'm just turning on the lights." The fallout began that afternoon. It was a digital siege. My phone began to blow up, a relentless assault on my peace. First, it was my mother. I didn't answer. She left a string of voicemails, each one a masterclass in emotional manipulation. The first was tearful. "Amelia, honey, it's Mom. Please, please call me. We can fix this. Don't do this to your father. He's not as strong as he looks." The second was angry. "How dare you? How dare you threaten us with lawyers after everything we've done for you, all the sacrifices we made? You are a deeply ungrateful daughter." The third was pure weaponized guilt. "Your father's heart can't take this kind of stress. He's been having chest pains all day. Do you want that on your conscience, Amelia? Do you?" Then came my dad. One single clipped voicemail. "You've made a grave mistake. You clearly don't understand how the real world works. You are playing with fire. Call this off, now." It wasn't a request. It was an order, delivered in the same tone he'd used my whole life. A tone that expected and demanded my compliance. I deleted them all without listening to them a second time. My finger hovering over the delete button felt like a small act of rebellion. Then came the flying monkeys. My Aunt Carol, my mother's sister, called, "Amelia, your mother is beside herself. How can you be so cruel? It was just to help your brother." My Uncle Stan, my dad's brother, texted, "Your dad is a good man. Don't let a little money tear this family apart." They were all reading from the same script. A script written by my parents, casting me as the cold, heartless villain. The real surprise came that evening. A frantic knock on my apartment door. It was Mark. He looked like he'd been through a war. His hair was a mess. His eyes were red-rimmed and bloodshot. He smelled faintly of whiskey. "You've ruined my life," he hissed, pushing past me into my apartment. No, Mark, I said calmly, closing the door and blocking his path further. You, Mom and Dad did that. I'm just refusing to be buried in the rubble with you. Ryan left me, he said, his voice cracking, all the bluster gone. He packed a bag and went back to his parents' house this morning. He said he can't marry into a family of criminals. His father, Thomas Chen, he's furious. He's a man of honor, Amelia. He values honesty, integrity. You know what he called us? He called us grifters. The word, a cheap, ugly word for cheap, ugly actions, hung in the air between us. And it was devastatingly accurate. That sounds like a you problem, not a me problem, I said. My voice was colder than I intended, but there was no pity left in me for him. You have to fix this, he pleaded, his anger collapsing into desperate, whining desperation. Call the lawyer. Tell them it was all a big misunderstanding. I'll pay you back. Promise. Somehow, the story of his life. I looked at my younger brother, the golden child, the one who had everything handed to him on a silver platter, and I realized our parents hadn't just spoiled him, they had crippled him. He had no idea how to stand on his own 2 feet, how to face a consequence he couldn't charm or manipulate his way out of. It's far too late for that, Mark, I said, my voice flat. This is out of my hands now. It's in the hands of the lawyers and the bank. You should go home. He just stared at me, his face a mask of utter disbelief. He truly, genuinely believed that I would fold. He always thought that in the end, I would be the one to fix it. I opened the door. He stumbled out without another word. The final push, the thing that erased any last lingering shred of doubt, came later that night. A voicemail from my mother, left after Mark had clearly gone home and told them of his failed mission. Her voice was no longer tearful or angry. It was dripping with a cold, slurring venom. I see now, she said. I see it all so clearly. You were always jealous of your brother. Always. You have that big, empty house all to yourself, and you couldn't stand to see him have something nice of his own. You'd rather see us all destroyed than see him happy. I hope you're happy, Amelia. I hope you enjoy rattling around in that house all alone for the rest of your life, because as of this moment, you are no longer our daughter. Click. I stood there in the quiet of my hallway, the phone glowing in my hand. That was it. The final formal amputation. And the strangest thing happened. It didn't hurt. It was clarifying. She hadn't just confirmed my decision. She had set me free. That's when my phone rang again. It was an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, but some instinct made me press the green button. Amelia, it's Ryan. His voice was shaky but clear. Listen, First of all, I am so sorry. I had no idea, I swear. I'm mortified. He took a breath. My dad, he's a man of principle. He's appalled by all of this. But he wants to meet you. He said he can't make a judgment without hearing the story directly from the source. He wants to understand the woman his son was planning to marry into a family with. My mind raced. Thomas Chen, a self-made millionaire in the tech import business. A man whose reputation was built on being ruthless, but meticulously fair. A meeting with him could change everything. When and where? I asked. That's the difficult part, Ryan said, his voice hesitant. My family is still expected to make an appearance at your grandparents' 50th wedding anniversary party this Saturday. It's a long-standing commitment. My dad insists on going. He said he wants to meet you there, on neutral ground. An anniversary party, with the whole extended family. And the Chens. It wasn't just a meeting. It was a public tribunal. I'll be there, I said without hesitation. The eye of the storm was passing. The second, more violent wall of the hurricane was on its way, and I was going to walk right into it. The oak room at the Northgate Country Club was exactly as pretentious as I remembered. The air was thick with the cloying scent of lilies and the quiet hum of polite, meaningless chatter. Walking through the double doors felt like walking onto a stage, the lights hot and every eye on me. The theme of my grandparents' 50th anniversary party was golden years, but the atmosphere felt more like a Cold War. I saw my parents immediately. They were positioned strategically near the entrance, greeting relatives like political candidates working a rope line. The moment they saw me, their practiced smiles froze and then curdled. My mother, Diana, gave me a look of such pure theatrical disdain it could have won her an award. My father, George, just glared, his jaw so tight I could see the muscles flexing from across the room. In a move of silent, choreographed condemnation, they both turned their backs on me to greet the next guest. The message was clear. I was an outcast. A few aunts and uncles, no doubt fed a steady diet of my mother's propaganda, shot me nervous, pitying looks. I just ignored them, my face a mask of calm indifference as I headed straight for the bar. I needed a club soda and a moment to brace myself. My cousin Emily, my mother's niece, found me there. She was one of the few relatives I actually liked. She had a good head on her shoulders and a healthy skepticism for our family's brand of drama. Heard there was a Category 5 hurricane in the Miller family, she said quietly, ordering a gin and tonic. You could say that, I said, taking a long sip of my soda. The ice clinked against the glass. Let me guess, she said, leaning in so no one could overhear. Aunt Diana has been calling everyone, weeping, painting you as the cold-hearted villain who's trying to destroy the family over a small financial misunderstanding. You've pretty much nailed the script, I admitted. I knew it, she sighed, shaking her head. She's a piece of work. For what it's worth, Amelia, some of us have been watching this blatant favoritism with Mark for 20 years. We've seen how they treat you. We're on your side. It was a small comfort, but in that hostile room, it felt like a lifeline. Then they arrived. The Chens. Thomas and his wife Linda walked in, and the entire gravitational pull of the room seemed to shift toward them. Ryan trailed behind them like a ghost, his eyes fixed on the floor. Thomas Chen was exactly as I'd seen in business articles. Tall, lean, in an impeccably tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment. He radiated an aura of calm, unshakable authority. He scanned the room with intelligent, discerning eyes that missed nothing. My parents immediately descended on them, their faces stretched into grotesque masks of warmth and flattery. Thomas, Linda, so wonderful of you to come. You look fabulous, my father boomed, clapping Thomas on the shoulder a little too hard. Thomas just gave a slight, formal nod, his eyes moving past my father and finding me at the bar. He gave a brief, almost imperceptible nod in my direction, a clear signal. The game was on. The confrontation came sooner than I expected. My mother, fueled by 2 glasses of overpriced champagne and a lifetime of self-pity, saw her opening. Ryan had just introduced me to his father, and Thomas and I were having a quiet, polite conversation near the patio doors. He was asking me about my work, about the software I developed. He was testing me. And my mother, seeing this, saw an act of war. She marched over, her heels clicking aggressively on the marble floor, her face flushed with alcohol and indignation. Amelia, I need to speak with you, she said, her voice loud, sharp, and designed to turn heads. Several nearby conversations faltered. Mom, this isn't the time or the place, I said quietly, trying to de-escalate. Oh yes, it is the time and the place, she declared, her voice rising to a theatrical pitch. She deliberately turned her body to include Thomas Chen in her audience, a single perfect tear welling in her eye. Mr. Chen, I am so terribly sorry you have to witness this family ugliness. I don't know what my daughter has told you, but she is a deeply troubled, ungrateful girl. She is trying to tear our family apart. She's threatening to send her own father to jail over a simple loan, a misunderstanding, after we sacrificed everything for her. A complete dead silence fell over our section of the room. This was it. The public execution she had planned. My father started to move toward us from a few feet away, his expression a mixture of anger and support for his wife's performance. But Thomas Chen did something unexpected. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at my hysterical mother. He turned his cool, analytical gaze directly on my father, who had just arrived at the scene, ready to play his supporting role. His voice was calm, almost conversational, but it cut through the room like a surgeon's scalpel. George, he said, his tone casual, you were a branch manager for, 30 years? My dad was completely thrown off balance. The script had been changed. Yes, that's right. 32, actually. He said it with a hint of his old pride. 32 years, Thomas repeated, nodding slowly as if impressed. So you, of all people, would be intimately familiar with the exact federal statutes regarding signature forgery on a secured loan document, wouldn't you? Specifically, a home equity line of credit, which is a federally insured instrument. My father's face went from a confident red to a sickly, mottled white. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Thomas continued, his voice still level, yet carrying with absolute clarity to every corner of the now silent room. You'd know, for instance, that under U.S. Code, Title 18, Section 1344, bank fraud carries a penalty of up to 30 years in a federal prison. and a fine of up to $1 million. You'd also know that any bank's fraud department is legally obligated to report such a crime to the FBI. He let that sit in the air. This is a bit more than a simple misunderstanding, wouldn't you agree, George? My mother froze, her mouth agape, the fake tear forgotten on her cheek. The self-pitying victim act had vanished, replaced by a look of sheer, naked terror. She looked at my father for help, for a rebuttal, but he was staring at Thomas Chen as if he'd just seen the devil himself. The entire party was watching, captivated by this quiet, brutal dissection. Then Thomas delivered the final, devastating blow. He turned his back on my parents, a gesture of complete and utter dismissal. He faced me. He reached into the inner pocket of his jacket and pulled out a sleek black business card made of heavy stock. "Amelia," he said, his voice now warm, filled with a respect that felt like a physical shield. "When you are finished with this family matter, I want you to call me. I'm starting a new logistics and technology venture. I need a chief technology officer to build the entire digital infrastructure from the ground up. I need a woman of your integrity on my team." He placed the card firmly into the palm of my hand. His grip was strong and reassuring. He looked me straight in the eye. A woman who stands up for what is right, especially when it's this difficult, is a woman worth investing in. He then nodded curtly to me, took his wife's arm, and said, "Linda, Ryan, I believe we are done here." And the three of them turned and walked out of the party, leaving a trail of absolute social and emotional devastation in their wake. I stood there, motionless, holding the business card. It felt as heavy and as valuable as a gold bar. My parents were frozen, their faces a grotesque tableau of shock, humiliation, and raw fear. They hadn't just been exposed, they had been annihilated. And it had happened in front of everyone they knew, at the hands of the very man they were so desperate to impress. Their entire world, a world built on a fragile foundation of appearances and lies, had just been leveled by a few quiet questions and a single piece of paper. The aftermath of the anniversary party was swift and merciless. The whispers at the party turned into a wildfire of phone calls the next day. The family grapevine, the very tool my mother had so expertly wielded to isolate me and spread her version of events, now turned on her with a vengeance. My cousin Emily called me on Sunday afternoon. "You are the talk of the town," she said, a note of awe in her voice. "Aunt Diana has apparently unplugged her phone. Uncle George hasn't left the house. Word is Grandpa is furious with them. You didn't just win, Amelia. It was a total rout." But the social fallout was nothing compared to the legal and financial tsunami that was heading their way. Michael Wilson called me first thing Monday morning, his voice brisk and professional. "The bank's fraud department has officially opened a case file," he said. "They've frozen the line of credit, of course. They've also informed me that, as Mr. Chen correctly pointed out at the party, and yes, they heard all about that, they are legally obligated to forward their findings to the appropriate federal authorities. Your parents will be hearing from a federal investigator within the week." "What are their options?" I asked. I felt a strange sense of detachment, like I was a consultant on a project and not the epicenter of a family's implosion. "Realistically, they have one, and only one, move left on the chessboard," Michael explained. "They can try to make the bank whole before formal charges are filed. If they can pay back the $200,000 immediately and in full, the bank might be inclined to tell the prosecutor that they consider the matter closed from a financial perspective. It doesn't guarantee the prosecutor won't proceed, but it's their only shot at avoiding a prison sentence." That same afternoon, I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of, a man with a tired, defeated voice. He was representing my parents. He didn't try to argue, he didn't posture, he just wanted to know what my terms were for a potential settlement. "My terms are not with my parents," I told him, my voice cold and clear. "My terms are with reality. Their fight is with the bank and the law. However," I continued, "if they can find a way to pay back the full $200,000 to the bank, I will inform the bank's investigator that my family has rectified the situation and that I, as the victim, do not wish to press personal charges for the identity theft." I paused, then delivered the final, non-negotiable condition. "And they will sign a legally binding document, drafted by my lawyer, agreeing to cover all of my legal fees to date, and barring them from any and all contact with me, my finances, or my assets in perpetuity." It was a demand for unconditional surrender. And within an hour, their lawyer called Michael back. They had taken the deal. The final meeting, the signing of the documents, took place a week later in Michael Wilson's sterile, beige conference room. The air in the room was so thick with unspoken resentment and defeat, you could have cut it with a knife. I sat on one side of the long polished table. My parents sat on the other. Mark was with them, a hollowed-out shell of his former self, staring blankly at the wall. My parents looked like they had aged a decade in 10 days. My father's usual bluster was gone, replaced by a gray, defeated slump in his expensive suit. His hands rested on the table, trembling slightly. My mother, who was always so immaculately put together, looked disheveled. She stared at the tabletop, her gaze fixed on a single wood grain, refusing to look at me. Michael, ever the professional, laid out the documents with a crisp, efficient rustle of paper. There were 2 sets. The first was a cashier's check for $214,500, the full principal plus fees, made out to the bank. The second was the settlement and no-contact agreement I had demanded. Michael explained the terms in a dry, legal monotone. He explained how my parents had to take out a high-interest second mortgage on their own home, the home I grew up in, the home they had been so proud of, to secure the funds for the cashier's check. He mentioned, almost as an aside, that they had also had to liquidate a stock portfolio they had been saving for their golden years. They were essentially setting their own future on fire to pay for their crime against mine. If you sign this, Michael concluded, his voice neutral, Ms. Miller agrees to inform the authorities that she considers the matter financially resolved. We cannot promise what the U.S. Attorney's Office will do, but this is your best and only path forward to mitigate the consequences. My father picked up the heavy, expensive pen. His hand shook so badly he could barely form the letters of his own name. His signature, once so bold and authoritative on checks and documents, was now a weak, spidery scrawl. He slid the papers across the table to my mother without a word. She picked up the pen, and for a fleeting, terrible moment she looked up. Her eyes, empty of their usual fire, met mine. I braced myself for anything, a final plea, a curse, a flicker of remorse. But there was nothing, just a cold, empty void. It was the look of a complete stranger. In that moment, I knew with absolute certainty that I had made the right decision. She signed her name. They pushed the stack of papers back to the center of the table. The deal was done. Michael gathered the documents, placed them neatly in a folder, and stood up. "That will be all," he said. My parents stood up like automatons. They didn't say a word. Not goodbye, not, "I'm sorry," not even a curse. Nothing. They just turned, and with Mark trailing them like a lost child, they walked out of the room. I watched them go, 3 strangers leaving a business meeting that had just concluded. I sat there for a long time after they left, staring at the empty chairs on the other side of the table. There was no feeling of victory. There was no thrill of revenge. There was just a profound, quiet, echoing emptiness. It wasn't the triumphant feeling of winning a war. It was the grim, solemn peace of having survived a necessary amputation. A toxic, gangrenous part of my life had been cut away, and while I knew it was necessary for my survival, a phantom limb would always ache where it used to be. Finally, I stood up, thanked Michael for his help, and walked out of the air-conditioned office building into the bright, warm afternoon sun. And for the first time in my entire adult life, I felt truly, completely, and utterly light. The 6 months that followed were an exercise in relearning how to live. It was like emerging from a dark, cramped basement into the open air. The world seemed quieter, clearer, and full of potential. My phone didn't ring with demands, passive-aggressive comments, or manufactured emergencies. My weekends were my own, to be filled with hiking, reading, or the simple, glorious joy of doing absolutely nothing. The silence in my life was deafening at first. The absence of their constant noise felt strange, but slowly it transformed into peace. It became my own. I took the sleek black business card Thomas Chen had given me and propped it up on my desk, right next to my monitor. For a full week, I just looked at it. It was more than a piece of paper. It was a symbol of a crossroads. Path A was my current life, a comfortable, secure, well-paying corporate job where I was respected but not fulfilled. Path B was the terrifying, thrilling unknown that the card represented. The old Amelia, the Amelia who had been conditioned to play it safe and not make waves, would have stayed on Path A. But the old Amelia was gone. She had died in that conference room. With a deep breath that felt like it was my first as a free woman, I picked up the phone and made the call. Thomas Chen answered on the second ring, his voice as calm and authoritative as I remembered. "Amelia, I was wondering when you'd call," he said, a hint of a smile in his voice. "Can you meet for lunch tomorrow? Noon, the Capitol Grill. We met at a corner booth surrounded by the quiet clink of silverware and the low murmur of business deals being made. He didn't waste time with small talk. Over seared tuna and iced tea, he laid out his vision. He wanted to build a new kind of logistics company, one driven by intelligent, predictive technology that could streamline international shipping for mid-sized companies, a market the big players ignored. It was a brilliant, ambitious, and incredibly complex challenge. It made the corporate software I had been writing feel like child's play. "I'm not offering you a job, Amelia," he said, looking at me intently over his wine glass. "Jobs are for people who want to be told what to do. I'm offering you a partnership. I'm putting up the capital. I need a chief technology officer to be the architect, to build the entire digital system from the ground up. I need someone I can trust, someone with unshakable integrity." I was stunned into silence. Partnership. CTO. He wasn't just offering me a chance. He was offering me a seat at the head table. A seat I had earned, not one I had to apologize for occupying or shrink myself to fit into. It was the polar opposite of the role my family had assigned me. A slow smile spread across my face, the first truly joyful smile I had felt in a long, long time. "I'm in," I said, my voice firm. "I'm all in." The next year was a whirlwind, a blur of exhilarating, exhausting, and deeply rewarding work. I handed in my 2 weeks' notice at my old job, walking away from the golden handcuffs with a sense of liberation. Sarah, my rock and my best friend, did the same a month later, cashing in her stock options to join me as our chief of operations. "I'm not letting you have all the fun," she said with a grin. We started in a small rented office space with white bars for walls and a coffee machine that was constantly running. The air hummed with the energy of creation. We were building something from nothing, brick by digital brick. We were pouring our own foundations, not with lies and manipulation, but with clean code, late nights, endless cups of coffee, and the sheer, unadulterated force of our will. My relationship with Thomas grew from a business partnership into a genuine mentorship, then into a friendship. He was tough. He was demanding. He expected nothing less than excellence. But he was always fair. He taught me about business strategy, about negotiation, about how to lead a team not through fear but through respect. He was the father figure I never had. One who saw my strength not as a resource to be endlessly exploited, but as an asset to be nurtured and invested in. He and his wife Linda often had me over for dinner, and their home was a place of warmth, laughter, and intelligent conversation. Everything my childhood home was not. One Tuesday afternoon, about a year after the signing, my phone buzzed with an unknown number. My first instinct was to ignore it, a habit from the old days, but something made me answer. "Hello?" A hesitant, frail voice on the other end. "Amelia, it's your mother." I was silent. The name sounded foreign. I had nothing to say to the woman on the other end of the line. I just wanted to call," she began, her voice quivering with that familiar self-pitying tremor, "and say, well, things have been very, very hard for us. We had to sell the house. You know, we're in a small condo now. Your father's health isn't good. His heart, the stress of it all. And Mark, he and Ryan are trying to work things out in counseling, but it's been so difficult for him." She was reciting a list of her grievances, a litany of her losses. It wasn't an apology. It was a balance sheet of her misery. And she was trying to send me the bill. "I'm sorry to hear that life has been difficult," I said, my voice polite, neutral, the voice I would use with a stranger. "I just hope you're happy, Amelia," she said. And there it was, the final pathetic dagger of martyrdom. "I hope ruining our lives and turning your back on your family was worth it for you." And in that moment, the last ghost of my old life finally dissolved into thin air. She hadn't learned a thing. She would never learn. She still saw herself as the victim, me as the aggressor. She would live in that prison of her own making for the rest of her life. "Mom," I said, and the word itself felt like a lie. "I didn't ruin your lives. You made choices. I simply made my own. I have to go now. I have a meeting." "But Amelia, wait." I ended the call. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel sadness. I just felt a profound sense of closure. I swiveled in my chair and looked around my bustling office. Sarah was at a whiteboard, energetically diagramming a new workflow for our European expansion. Our small team of young, brilliant engineers was laughing by the coffee machine. Through the glass walls of the main conference room, I could see Thomas Chen, my partner and my mentor, on a video call, closing another major deal with a smile. This was my new foundation. This was my new family. Not one bound by blood and toxic obligation, but one forged in mutual respect, shared trust, and a collective vision for the future. And in that moment, surrounded by the happy, productive noise of my own creation, I knew I was truly irrevocably free. Another year passed in a flash of hard work and success. Our company, which we had named Loy Corps, wasn't just surviving, it was thriving. We had secured major contracts, hired more staff, and moved into a larger, sunlit office downtown. My life was full of complex problems to solve, friendships that nourished me, and a deep sense of purpose that I had never known was possible. Then, one Saturday afternoon, an invitation arrived in my mailbox. The envelope was made of thick, elegant cardstock, my name and address written in beautiful, flowing calligraphy. My heart gave a little jolt. It was from Mark and Ryan. They were getting married, for real this time. Tucked inside the formal invitation was a small, separate handwritten note from Mark. I know I have no right to ask you for anything, and I know sorry is a word that means nothing after what I did, but I've been in therapy for almost 2 years now. Ryan and I are working through it all, and I'm trying to understand everything that happened, and my part in it. I was weak, and I was a coward. I'm trying to be a better man. It would mean more than I can say if you would come. Not for them, but for us. To see that I'm trying to build a different life, an honest one. I held the invitation for a long time, the heavy paper cool against my fingertips. A part of me, the scarred, defensive part, wanted to tear it up and throw it away, to sever the final tie. But the woman who read that note wasn't the same woman from 2 years ago. She was no longer ruled by pain or anger. She was stronger, more settled in her own skin. She could afford to be gracious. I decided to go. The wedding was held at a beautiful, rustic vineyard, a much more modest and tasteful affair than the ostentatious country club wedding they had originally planned. I walked in alone, but I didn't feel lonely. I saw friends from the industry, business associates, and then I saw my real family, Sarah and her husband, and Thomas and Linda Chen, who all smiled warmly and saved me a seat at their table. Then, from across the lawn, I saw them, my parents. They were sitting at a small table in the back, looking older, smaller, and distinctly out of place. They saw me, and for a moment, the old familiar tension crackled in the air between us. My mother started to make a move, a half rise from her chair to approach me. But my father, with a look of weary resignation, put a hand on her arm and gently shook his head. Later, during the reception, as I was heading to the bar, I found myself face to face with them. It was unavoidable. "Amelia," my father said, his voice raspy, the old boom gone from it. "Hello, Dad. Mom," I replied, my voice even and calm. There was no anger, no fear, just a quiet neutrality. My mother opened her mouth, and I could see the familiar litany of complaints and justifications forming on her lips, her eyes starting to glisten, but she stopped. She looked at me, really looked at me, at my well-tailored suit, at the easy, confident way I held myself, at the way several people had greeted me with genuine warmth and respect as I walked across the lawn. She wasn't looking at her daughter, the family scapegoat. She was looking at a successful, confident stranger who no longer needed anything from her. "You look well," she said finally, the words sounding hollow and inadequate. "I am," I said, offering a small, polite nod. "I wish you both well." And then I did the one thing I had never been able to do before. I turned my back on their drama, not with anger, but with peace, and I walked away. I walked over to where Mark and Ryan were talking with guests. Mark saw me approaching, and his eyes filled with a complicated, profound mixture of shame and gratitude. "You came," he whispered, as if he couldn't believe it. "You asked me to," I said, and I clapped him on the shoulder, a gesture of forgiveness, of moving on. I looked at him and Ryan, a couple genuinely trying to build something honest from the wreckage of lies. "Congratulations, you two. I truly wish you both a lifetime of happiness." I spent the rest of the evening laughing with Sarah, talking strategy with Thomas, and even dancing a little. As I looked out across the vineyard, at the strings of fairy lights twinkling in the twilight, and the sound of music and laughter filling the warm evening air, I saw my parents watching me from their lonely table at the edge of the celebration. For the first time in my life, looking at them, I felt nothing but a distant, quiet sense of peace. They were a chapter in a book that I had already finished reading. My story was just beginning, and from now on, I was the only one holding the pen. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it reached you in some way. It was a long and painful journey, but it taught me that sometimes the most important boundaries we need to set are with the very people who are supposed to be the closest to us. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to make an impossible choice to protect your own peace and your own future? Share your story in the comments below. I read them all. And don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss what comes next.